Welcome to The Explainer, where we're digging into one of the most central and, you could say, explosive titles in all of history, Son of God. You know, the entire Christian faith is really built on this one phrase. It's a title that has shaped empires, defined cultures, and it's still a cornerstone of belief for billions of people. But what did it actually mean to the people who first used it? To find out, we've got to go back in time. So get this. This wasn't just some abstract theological term. The title Son of God was the main charge against Jesus at his trial. It's the very reason the Gospel of John was even written. But here's the twist. The phrase existed long before Jesus ever walked the earth. Okay, to solve this mystery, we're gonna have to put on our historical detective hats. We need to sift through clues from the world before and during the time of Jesus to piece together how this familiar title took on a radical, world-changing new meaning. All right, our first set of clues takes us to the Hebrew Scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament. Now, the term Son of God definitely shows up here, but it probably doesn't mean what you think. And what's really important is that it was used in a few different ways, and it never meant someone who was divine by nature. The title was applied pretty broadly. It could mean heavenly beings, like the angels in God's divine council. It could describe the entire nation of Israel, seen as God's chosen people. It was also a title for the king, which basically meant he was God's representative here on earth. And finally, any righteous person who was just living in obedience to God could be called a son. So what's the common thread here? The title always described a relationship or a function, a specific job to do for God, not a divine essence. And this key concept is called functional sonship. See, in the Jewish context, being a son of God was all about your appointment and your obedience. It was about a role you performed. You could think of it like this. It was a job description, not a birth certificate. Okay, now let's widen our lens a bit. Let's look at the world Jesus was born into, the Hellenistic world. That's the Greek-influenced culture of the time. Because here, we find a completely different set of ideas floating around. And this is where things get really, really interesting. And this contrast is just so powerful. On one side, you have the Jewish world thinking about a human king chosen for a specific task. But on the other, the Greco-Roman world is filled with stories of superhuman, semi-divine beings. This is setting the stage for a massive cultural collision when the early Christians start talking about Jesus. I mean, from deified emperors claiming they had divine lineage to mythological heroes and miracle workers, the Greco-Roman world was absolutely full of so-called divine men. But this was a world away from the Hebrew understanding of a unique covenant relationship with the one true God. So, you've got these two competing ideas in the air, right? The Jewish functional son and the Greco-Roman divine man. And it's into this world that the Gospels arrive. And this is where a familiar title gets packed with a completely revolutionary new meaning. See, the early Christians didn't just pick one definition or the other. They basically created a whole new category. And they did this by highlighting three key scenes in Jesus' life. Now, in each of these moments, a divine voice from heaven directly identifies Jesus. And in doing so, it takes all the old ideas of sonship and just transforms them into something the world had never heard before. It all kicks off at his baptism. Here, that divine voice combines two really powerful Old Testament ideas. You've got the royal authority of a king, but it's fused with the deep humility of a chosen servant. So right from the very start, it's a mix of power and service. Then, later on at the Transfiguration, that identity gets turned up to 11. The title is now directly linked with supreme divine authority. That command, listen to him, it places his words above all others. He becomes the ultimate revelation of God. And the climax of this whole redefinition, well, it comes from the most unexpected person you can imagine. A Roman soldier, a pagan, a symbol of worldly power. He's the one who recognizes Jesus' identity. And not in display of might, but in his moment of absolute weakness and death. I mean, this just completely flips the world's idea of divine power on its head. So, we've seen the Jewish context of a functional role, and we've seen the Greco-Roman context of mythological heroes, and we've seen how the Gospels present Jesus. Now it's time to put the final pieces of this incredible puzzle together. So how exactly did the New Testament transform this title? Well, it didn't just borrow some familiar words, it forged a brand new concept, something more radical than anything that had come before it. The great shift was from a functional role to an ontological one, and this was a revolutionary change. It moved from describing a job someone does to defining who someone is in their very being, their fundamental nature. So, here's the big takeaway. The Christian claim fused four powerful ideas into one single title. It combined this unprecedented intimacy with God, using the personal term Abba, or Father. It merged the authority of a king with the humility of a suffering servant. It pointed to a divine nature, an ontological reality. And it claimed a universal authority that went beyond the borders of any one culture, creating something entirely new. Ultimately, when you understand this title's incredible journey, from just a common phrase with a bunch of different meanings to a cornerstone of a global faith, it gives you a really powerful lens. It shows us how ideas can evolve, how cultures can collide, and how the redefinition of a single phrase can, quite literally, change the entire course of history.